Chapter 7, The DNI Residence. Next day, as the first light of dawn spread across Washington, D.C., the nation's capital stirred to life. The city, cloaked in its usual air of power and secrecy, began to hum with the early morning activities of some of the most influential figures in the country. Deals were being made behind closed doors, classified conversations whispered through encrypted lines, and far from the public eye, decisions that could shape the future were already in motion. In a quiet, affluent neighborhood just outside the city, Director of National Intelligence Quentin Nedic sipped his morning coffee, the rising sun casting a soft glow over his perfectly manicured lawn. His eyes scanned the headlines of the day's briefings, but his mind was elsewhere, locked on the growing urgency surrounding Dr. Pullman's nanite technology. The implications of her work weighed heavily on him. While the public remained blissfully unaware, Nedic knew they were on the brink of something monumental. "I see, Stevens," Nedic said, his voice gravelly from the morning's quiet but filled with the sharpness of someone accustomed to being one step ahead. "Dr. Pullman has semi-convinced Chairwoman Cross to give her the green light on the nanite project." He paused, reflecting on the Senate's recent deliberations. "From what we know, her team, comprised of some of the world's brightest minds, is ready to push it to the next level. I'll need to make time to brief the president personally." The motorcade, sleek, black SUVs with tinted windows, sat waiting at the end of his driveway, engines idling like a pack of wolves prepared to spring into action. Nedic pulled his coat tighter around him as he stepped outside, the crisp morning air biting at his skin. His special assistant, Stephen Hathaway, fell into step beside him as they made their way to the first vehicle. "Sir, you're correct," Hathaway began, his tone respectful but laced with skepticism. "Dr. Pullman has convinced Chairwoman Cross, albeit by a slim margin, to move forward with the human trials." Nedic glanced at him, noting the unease in his assistant's voice. Hathaway's hesitance was palpable, as was his suspicion. "I believe," Hathaway continued, more cautiously now, "that Pullman and her team were already conducting trials under the radar. They're pushing for official approval now, but I'd bet good money that human testing has been underway for some time." Nedic nodded, slipping into the back seat of the armored SUV. His mind raced as the motorcade pulled out of the driveway, merging onto the quiet Virginia streets. The conversation hummed in the background as they sped toward D.C., the city still half asleep, unaware of the undercurrents running through its halls of power. "Damn it, Hathaway," Nedic barked, though his tone was more impressed than angry. "You might be right. I have to hand it to her. That damn Monica Pullman, when she sets her sights on something, she goes after it full throttle. And she doesn't back down." A trace of admiration slipped into his voice as the motorcade raced past the sprawling estates and pristine neighborhoods, the city coming alive in the distance. Nedic respected power, especially when wielded with precision and intelligence, and Monica Pullman had proven herself more than capable of both. She had manipulated the system to her advantage, and though she operated in the scientific realm, she played the political game just as ruthlessly. The SUV's tires hummed along the road as the motorcade entered the city, weaving through the early morning traffic. Pedestrians, oblivious to the importance of the black vehicles flashing by, went about their day, grabbing coffees and heading to work. But inside the sleek, bulletproof windows of Nedic's convoy, the conversation took on a graver tone. "I'll see what I can do about arranging that meeting with the president," Hathaway added, his voice more focused now. "You've also got a meeting with Chairwoman Senator Cross later today. She'll want to discuss the next steps after yesterday's committee meeting." Nedic nodded, half listening as his mind continued to calculate the next series of moves. He trusted Hathaway to handle the logistics, but the meeting with Cross would be crucial. He'd need to feel out where she stood, what her concerns were, and more importantly, how far she could be pushed. Cross was a political animal in her own right, cautious but not afraid to take risks if the payoff was substantial. She was a player in this high-stakes game, and Nedic knew that the right nudge could sway her fully behind Pullman's project. The motorcade approached the Pentagon, its massive structure looming ahead, before veering off toward the more discreet entryways reserved for top officials. the landscape became more secure, more sterile. Armed guards watched their approach with practiced vigilance as the motorcade rolled through the checkpoint without so much as a pause. The vehicles began their descent into the underground entryway to the DNI offices, the light of day disappearing behind them as they drove deeper into the labyrinth of the secure facility. The hum of the engine was now the only sound, the city above them far removed from this hidden world. Here, in the bowels of Washington's power structure, there were no headlines, no cameras, no accountability, just the quiet workings of the country's most guarded secrets. Nedic thumbed through his brief as the motorcade came to a slow stop, the armored vehicles easing into their designated parking spaces. His mind flicked to the reports he had yet to read, the risks yet to be assessed. The secrecy surrounding Pullman's labs, the degree to which the Department of Defense and other agencies had been kept in the dark, it all played on the razor's edge of danger. As the armored car doors opened, Nedic stepped out into the dimly lit corridor, flanked by security. Hathaway followed closely, his face unreadable, though Nedic could sense the underlying tension between them. The assistant had asked the right questions, but Nedic could tell Hathaway was putting together pieces of a puzzle that might lead back to him. And the possible conflict of interest with his son, Major Quentin Nedic III, had in all of this. "I'll brief the president later today," Nedic muttered as they strode through the winding halls of the secure facility. "But first, I need to get a full assessment of just how deep this goes." His mind raced as he considered the potential fallout. If Pullman's technology became public, if it was mishandled, or worse, weaponized, there would be not containing the consequences. The world outside had no idea what was being created behind these walls, the kind of power that was being engineered. Nedic's job was to ensure that power stayed within their control, that it didn't slip into hands that would turn it against the very people they were sworn to protect. As they entered the secured briefing room, the walls buzzing with encrypted communications and classified information, Nedic's resolve hardened. The stakes were rising, and every move mattered. There would be no room for error. The public might remain in the dark, but in this room, in these halls, the future was already being written, and it was up to DNI, Quentin Nedic, the second, to make sure it didn't spiral out of control. Chapter ended.